This story begins quietly, the way many tragedies do, without warning, without spectacle, and without the weight it would later carry. On a calm autumn evening in Salt Lake City, Utah, the University of Utah campus looked like any other college campus in mid-October. Students walked between buildings, some returning from classes, others heading toward dormitories, libraries, or nearby parking lots. The air was cool, the sky dimming as the sun faded behind the mountains, and life moved forward in ordinary rhythms. Lauren McCluskey was at the center of that ordinary world. Lauren was a student at the University of Utah, known among her peers as driven, competitive, and deeply focused on her future. She was also a standout athlete, a talented track and field star whose discipline and commitment had shaped much of her young life. To those who knew her, Lauren was ambitious but grounded, confident yet kind. She was the type of person who set goals and worked relentlessly toward them. In the weeks leading up to October 22, 2018, Lauren had been navigating a personal relationship that would later become the focus of intense scrutiny. She had been dating Melvin Rowland, a man several years older than her. At first, the relationship appeared unremarkable, but beneath the surface, serious concerns were already forming. Lauren discovered information about Rowland that alarmed her. He had a criminal history that included prior offenses and a pattern of deception. The relationship began to unravel as Lauren realized she had not been told the truth. She made the decision to end it. That decision, simple and justified, would later prove devastating. After the breakup, Lauren became increasingly concerned about her safety. Rowland did not accept the end of the relationship. His behavior grew more persistent and unsettling. Lauren did what many are advised to do in situations like this. She sought help. She contacted campus authorities. In early October of 2018, Lauren reported her concerns to the University of Utah police. She shared information about Rowland's criminal background and expressed fear about his behavior. Records later showed that multiple interactions occurred between Lauren and campus law enforcement in the days leading up to her death. She was not silent. She was not passive. She was actively asking for protection. But the system moved slowly. There were gaps, miscommunications, missed opportunities to intervene. At the time, Lauren could not have known how critical those moments would become. She trusted that reporting her concerns was the right step, that the warning she gave would be enough to keep her safe. On the evening of October 22, 2018, Lauren spoke with her mother over the phone. It was an ordinary conversation, the kind families have every day, updates, reassurance, connection. There was no indication that it would be their last. Later that night, Lauren was near a residence hall on campus when Melvin Rowland approached her. What happened next unfolded quickly and violently. Rowland produced a firearm and shot Lauren. She was critically wounded. Emergency responders arrived, but despite their efforts, Lauren McCluskey was pronounced dead. She was 21 years old. The campus was immediately placed on lockdown as authorities searched for the suspect. Students sheltered in place. Classes were canceled. Fear spread rapidly through the university community as news of the shooting circulated. The sense of safety that had defined campus life was shattered in an instant. Rowland fled the scene. Several hours later, after an extensive manhunt, authorities located him. The search ended when Melvin Rowland took his own life. The questions, however, were only beginning. In the days that followed, grief consumed the University of Utah. Vigils were held. Flowers and candles lined walkways. Teammates, classmates, and faculty struggled to understand how such a tragedy could occur, especially after warnings had been raised. Lauren's family began asking the same question many would later ask. Could this have been prevented? As details emerged, the focus shifted from the crime itself to the system surrounding it. The reports, the phone calls, the warnings that had been logged but not fully acted upon. The story became larger than one act of violence. It became a case study in institutional failure, warning signs, and the devastating cost of inaction. Lauren McCluskey's name would soon be known far beyond the University of Utah. Her case would spark lawsuits, policy reviews, and national conversations about campus safety, domestic violence, and the responsibility of institutions to protect those who come forward. But at its core, this story is about one young woman who asked for help, trusted the process, and never received the protection she deserved. This is Dark Psyche Case Files. If you're finding value in this documentary, like the video, leave a comment, and hit the subscribe button to stay updated with daily true crime stories. In the days following Lauren McCluskey's death, the shock did not fade. Instead, it settled heavily over the University of Utah, transforming grief into questions that refused to stay unanswered. Students returned to campus carrying fear alongside their backpacks. Parents called their children more often. Dorm rooms felt quieter. The place that once symbolized opportunity and growth had become a reminder of vulnerability. As investigators worked through the timeline, attention shifted backward, away from the night of the shooting and toward the days and weeks that came before it. What began to emerge was not a single failure, but a chain of missed chances. Lauren's decision to report Melvin Rowland was not a one-time act. She reached out multiple times, seeking guidance and protection. Her concerns were specific and grounded in evidence. She informed campus police that Rowland had lied about his name, his age, and his background. She revealed that he had a criminal history, including prior offenses that raised serious red flags. These were not vague fears. They were documented warnings. University police confirmed that they had received her reports. Officers conducted limited follow-ups, but critical information was not escalated with urgency. At one point, there was confusion regarding Rowland's identity due to the use of aliases. That confusion slowed the process. Instead of triggering immediate protective action, the situation remained unresolved. Lauren continued living her daily life, attending classes, training, and interacting with friends, all while carrying a growing sense of unease. Those closest to her later recalled that she was trying to be cautious without allowing fear to control her. She trusted that reporting the situation had set safeguards in motion. Behind the scenes, however, communication gaps widened. Internal reviews would later reveal that key details were not shared efficiently between departments. The seriousness of Rowland's criminal background was not fully recognized in time. Policies existed, but they were not effectively executed. What should have been treated as an urgent threat assessment was handled as a routine matter. On the night Lauren was killed, the system that should have protected her failed completely. As news of the shooting spread nationwide, media coverage intensified. Headlines focused on the tragedy, but investigative journalists quickly began uncovering Lauren's prior reports to campus police. Public reaction shifted from mourning to outrage. How could a young woman report credible threats and still be left unprotected? Lauren's family demanded answers. Her parents, devastated by the loss of their daughter, began reviewing the records. What they found only deepened their grief. Phone calls had been logged, reports had been filed, warnings had been issued, yet nothing had been done decisively enough to stop the outcome. The university released statements expressing sorrow and sympathy, emphasizing cooperation with authorities. But sympathy was not enough. Pressure mounted for accountability. Students organized protests, calling for changes to campus safety protocols. Advocacy groups joined the conversation, highlighting broader patterns of institutional inaction in cases involving stalking and intimate partner violence. Meanwhile, the legal process began to take shape. Lauren's family filed a lawsuit against the University of Utah, alleging negligence and wrongful death. The claim argued that the university had failed in its duty to protect Lauren despite clear warnings and opportunities to intervene. The case would become a pivotal moment, forcing universities nationwide to examine how they respond when students report threats. Beyond courtrooms and policy reviews, there was another dimension to the story, the psychological one. Melvin Rowland's actions prompted deeper analysis into patterns of control, obsession, and rejection. Experts noted that cases like this often follow a familiar trajectory: deception, exposure, loss of control, and escalation. The breakup did not end the relationship in Rowland's mind. It challenged his sense of power, and that challenge became dangerous. Lauren, unknowingly, had stepped into a psychological trap that countless victims before her had faced. Her attempt to reclaim autonomy was met with resistance that the system around her failed to recognize as lethal. As weeks passed, memorials gave way to movements. Lauren's name became associated not only with tragedy, but with change. Her family spoke publicly, urging institutions to listen when students asked for help. They emphasized that Lauren did everything she was supposed to do and still lost her life. The question lingered: if warnings had been taken seriously, would Lauren still be alive? That question would not fade. It would follow every review, every policy revision, and every conversation about campus safety from that point forward. This is Dark Psyche Case Files. If this story is impacting you, like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and hit the subscribe button to support the channel and stay connected to future true crime documentaries. This chapter unfolds in two connected movements, both centered on what happened after Lauren McCluskey's death and how the truth slowly surfaced through documents, testimony, and human behavior. The first part follows the immediate aftermath, while the second explores the deeper psychological and institutional consequences that followed. The days after Lauren's killing were defined by silence broken only by questions. In classrooms, professors struggled to continue lectures while students stared at desks, unable to focus. On the track where Lauren once trained, her absence was louder than any cheer that had ever followed her victories. Her teammates gathered, replaying memories, searching for signs they might have missed, wondering if something more could have been done. Grief does not move in straight lines. It circles, returns, and sharpens when truth begins to emerge. As investigators compiled reports, timelines began to solidify. The record showed that Lauren had contacted campus police multiple times within a short span. Each call carried urgency, but that urgency was diluted as it passed through procedural layers. What Lauren described as fear was translated into paperwork. What she experienced as danger was categorized as information pending verification. This distinction mattered more than anyone realized at the time. Internal communication logs revealed that officers had attempted to identify Melvin Rowland, but struggled due to false names and incomplete data. Rather than triggering immediate escalation, the uncertainty caused hesitation. The threat remained theoretical in official language, even as it felt imminent to Lauren herself. In true crime analysis, this moment is often where outcomes shift, not through malice but through delay. While Lauren tried to maintain normalcy, Rowland's behavior followed a pattern that experts would later describe as fixation. He monitored her movements, attempted contact, and refused to accept the loss of control. Rejection, in cases like this, does not end attachment. It intensifies it. Lauren's final days were not marked by panic, but by caution. She altered routines slightly. She remained aware of her surroundings. She believed reporting the situation had placed a safety net beneath her life. That belief, tragically, was misplaced. When the university announced that Rowland had died by suicide, public attention momentarily shifted. Some believed the story had ended, but for Lauren's family, it was only beginning. Her parents began asking for records. What followed was a slow unveiling of decisions that felt small in isolation but catastrophic in total. Phone logs confirmed calls. Emails confirmed warnings. Training manuals confirmed protocols, yet the outcome stood in stark contradiction to all of it. As media investigations expanded, the narrative changed. This was no longer only a story about an individual act of violence. It became a story about systems, accountability, and the space between policy and practice. The university commissioned internal reviews. Statements were released acknowledging procedural shortcomings. Apologies were issued, but for many, words arrived too late and without consequence. Lauren's mother spoke publicly, her voice steady but resolute. She emphasized that her daughter had trusted the institution responsible for her safety. She had done what students are told to do: report concerns, seek help, rely on authority. The failure, she said, was not Lauren. Public response intensified. Students organized demonstrations, demanding transparency and reform. Advocacy groups amplified Lauren's case as an example of how stalking and intimate partner violence are often underestimated until it is too late. The phrase "warning signs" appeared repeatedly in coverage, echoing across campuses nationwide. Behind closed doors, university administrators faced mounting pressure. Policies were reviewed line by line. Training procedures were scrutinized. The cost of inaction became impossible to ignore. This leads into the second movement of this chapter, where the focus shifts inward, toward psychology, motive, and meaning. Melvin Rowland's actions were not random. They followed a recognizable behavioral trajectory documented in numerous criminal cases. Deception at the beginning of the relationship served a purpose: control. When that deception was exposed, the relationship's power dynamic collapsed. What followed was not heartbreak, but rage rooted in entitlement. Experts explain that individuals who respond violently to rejection often perceive autonomy as a threat. Lauren's decision to leave was not simply personal. It challenged Rowland's constructed identity. The loss of control triggered an escalation that had been building beneath the surface. This is not an excuse, it is an explanation. True crime does not exist to justify violence, but to understand it deeply enough to prevent repetition. Lauren was not targeted because she was careless. She was targeted because she asserted independence. The danger lay not in her actions, but in the response they provoked. As the lawsuit moved forward, depositions revealed inconsistencies in how Lauren's reports had been handled. Officers admitted they had not fully grasped the immediacy of the threat. Administrators acknowledged communication breakdowns. Each admission added weight to the central question: what does protection actually mean when someone asks for help? The case eventually resulted in a settlement, but no outcome could restore what was lost. The financial resolution carried symbolic weight, representing acknowledgement rather than closure. Closure, for Lauren's family, remained out of reach. What endured instead was legacy. Lauren McCluskey's name became attached to reforms, training initiatives, and awareness campaigns. Universities across the country reviewed their response procedures. Some implemented new threat assessment teams. Others revised reporting protocols to prioritize victim perspective over bureaucratic certainty. Change, however, came at a cost that could not be undone. In the broader cultural conversation, Lauren's story became a reference point in discussions about campus safety, gender-based violence, and institutional responsibility. Her life, defined by discipline and promise, had been reduced in headlines to a final moment of violence, but those who loved her refused to let that be the end of the narrative. This chapter is not about endings, it is about consequences. Consequences of ignoring fear, consequences of delay, consequences of assuming that danger will announce itself clearly before it arrives. This is Dark Psyche Case Files. If this documentary continues to resonate with you, like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and hit the subscribe button to support the channel and stay connected to daily true crime stories. By the time the legal proceedings surrounding Lauren McCluskey's death gained public traction, the story had already shifted from shock to reckoning. What once felt like an isolated tragedy was now understood as a warning written in permanent ink. The focus was no longer solely on what happened to Lauren, but on what happened after she asked for help, and why that help never arrived in time. Lauren's family entered a world they never expected to navigate. Court filings replaced family dinners. Legal language replaced the warmth of memories. Every document they reviewed carried emotional weight, because each page represented a moment when intervention was possible. Each timestamp marked a decision that might have changed the outcome. Depositions revealed how responsibility had been fragmented. No single individual had ignored Lauren outright. Instead, her fear was diluted through layers of process. One officer believed another department was handling the matter. One administrator assumed the situation was being monitored. This diffusion of responsibility created a dangerous vacuum, one where urgency disappeared without anyone consciously dismissing it. In true crime analysis, this phenomenon appears repeatedly. When everyone is responsible, no one truly is. Lauren's reports were categorized as concerning but not immediately threatening. The distinction between discomfort and danger proved fatal. Her words, spoken plainly, lost intensity as they moved through institutional channels. The system prioritized verification over protection, certainty over caution. The lawsuit brought these realities into public view. As hearings progressed, testimony painted a picture of good intentions constrained by inadequate structure. Officers spoke about training limitations. Administrators referenced unclear protocols. Each explanation, while technically valid, deepened the sense that the system had been designed to react rather than prevent. For Lauren's parents, listening to these explanations was unbearable. They did not seek vengeance. They sought acknowledgement. They wanted institutions to say, clearly and without deflection, that Lauren should have been protected and was not. Public opinion aligned with them. Media coverage intensified as national outlets framed the case as emblematic of a broader failure in how threats against women are assessed. Commentators highlighted the pattern, warning signs minimized, victims told to wait, action taken only after violence occurs. Lauren's case became a reference point, cited in discussions far beyond Utah. As the pressure mounted, the University of Utah announced policy changes. Threat assessment procedures were revised. New training programs were implemented. Communication pathways were clarified. On paper, progress was visible. But progress after loss carries a different weight. For Lauren's family, each reform felt like confirmation that something had indeed been wrong before, that the system could have changed earlier, if only it had been forced to. The settlement that followed did not bring closure. No amount of money could. Instead, it represented a public acknowledgement of failure. It was an admission written in legal terms, signaling that Lauren's death was not unavoidable. This marks the transition into the second movement of this chapter, where the lens pulls back even further, from institutional responsibility to cultural consequence. Lauren McCluskey's story began to influence how other cases were perceived. Survivors of stalking and harassment referenced her name when speaking about their own experiences. Advocates used her case to illustrate the gap between reporting and protection. Parents cited her story when questioning campus safety assurances. What made Lauren's case particularly resonant was not only the violence itself, but the clarity of the warning signs beforehand. This was not hindsight bias. The concerns had been voiced in real time. The danger had been named. True crime often exposes uncomfortable truths about predictability. Some crimes feel sudden only because earlier signals were ignored. Lauren's death fit this pattern with devastating precision. Psychologists analyzing the case pointed again to the behavioral escalation displayed by Melvin Rowland. His inability to accept rejection, combined with deception and control, aligned with known risk indicators. The tragedy was not unpredictable, it was unaddressed. Lauren's trust in authority became one of the most haunting elements of the case. She believed the system existed to protect her. She believed speaking up was enough. That belief, shared by many, became a point of reflection for institutions nationwide. In the years following her death, universities faced increased scrutiny. Students demanded clearer reporting pathways. Parents demanded transparency. Administrators could no longer rely on assurances alone. Lauren's story had altered expectations. Yet even as change took shape, the emotional truth remained unchanged. Lauren McCluskey was more than a case study. She was a daughter, a teammate, a student, a young woman with plans extending far beyond the campus she never left. Her life cannot be reduced to lessons learned, no matter how necessary those lessons may be. True crime documentaries often end with resolution, arrests, verdicts, sentences. Lauren's story resists that structure. The person responsible for her death did not stand trial. The institution responsible for her safety did not face criminal consequence. What remains instead is moral accountability. And moral accountability does not expire. This chapter exists to sit with that discomfort, to acknowledge that prevention is not guaranteed, but negligence is not inevitable, to remind us that systems are built by people, and people can choose urgency over convenience. Lauren McCluskey's name continues to be spoken because forgetting would mean accepting the conditions that allowed her death. Remembering her means insisting that warning signs matter, that fear deserves belief, and that asking for help should never be an act of faith alone. This is Dark Psyche Case Files. If this documentary is making you think, like the video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and hit the subscribe button to support the channel and stay connected to daily true crime stories. Time has a way of changing how a story is remembered but not how it is felt. Years after Lauren McCluskey's death, her absence still carries weight, not only for those who loved her, but for everyone who encounters her story for the first time. The distance between the event and the present has not softened its impact. If anything, it has clarified it. True crime often promises answers. It suggests that if we follow the trail carefully enough, everything will make sense. But some cases refuse to resolve cleanly. Lauren's case belongs to that category. It leaves behind lessons rather than conclusions, warnings rather than closure. What endures most strongly is the contrast between who Lauren was and how her life ended. She was defined by movement. As an athlete, she trained her body to respond to discipline and persistence. She understood effort, progression, and resilience. Those qualities shaped how she approached challenges on and off the track. When something felt wrong, she addressed it directly. When she felt unsafe, she spoke up. Lauren did not live recklessly. She lived deliberately. In the years following her death, interviews with friends and teammates revealed a consistent picture. Lauren was cautious, thoughtful, and aware. She was not dismissive of danger, nor was she consumed by fear. She believed in balance, the idea that responsibility could coexist with trust in systems designed to protect. That belief is central to understanding why her story resonates so deeply. Lauren did not ignore warning signs. She acted on them. She did not isolate herself. She reached out. She did not assume she could handle the situation alone. She reported it. These actions are often presented as best practices, as the correct responses to perceived danger. Yet the outcome challenges that narrative. For many viewers, listeners, and readers, Lauren's story triggers an unsettling realization. Doing everything right does not guarantee safety if the system fails to respond appropriately. This realization sits at the heart of the discomfort her case creates. It forces a confrontation with an uncomfortable truth, that protection is not just about individual action, but institutional responsibility. As her story circulated, it became clear that Lauren represented countless others whose fears had been minimized. Survivors came forward, sharing experiences that mirrored hers, reports made, concerns noted, urgency lost in translation. The pattern was familiar. Lauren's case did not introduce a new problem. It illuminated an existing one. In classrooms, her story began appearing in discussions about criminal justice, psychology, and public policy. Students analyzed timelines. They examined decision-making processes. They debated responsibility. But beyond the academic lens, there was an emotional undercurrent that could not be ignored. This was not theory, this was loss. Her parents continued to speak publicly, not because it was easy, but because silence felt like surrender. They emphasized that remembrance was not enough. Change had to be active, intentional, and continuous. They spoke about Lauren as a person first, not a victim, a daughter who laughed, competed, planned, and dreamed. The act of telling Lauren's story became an extension of protecting others. True crime at its best serves this purpose. It does not sensationalize pain. It contextualizes it. It traces patterns, highlights failures, and insists that victims be remembered for more than the moment they were taken. In Lauren's case, remembering means acknowledging complexity. Melvin Rowland's actions were the result of choices, dangerous, deliberate choices rooted in entitlement and control. But the environment in which those choices unfolded mattered. The lack of immediate intervention mattered. The hesitation mattered. Violence rarely exists in isolation. It thrives in gaps. Lauren's trust in authority was not naive. It was reasonable. Society encourages individuals to report threats rather than confront them alone. When that trust is broken, the consequences extend far beyond a single case. They reshape how people interact with systems meant to protect them. This is one of the lasting impacts of Lauren's story. Some students became more skeptical. Some survivors hesitated longer before reporting. Others demanded clearer accountability. The ripple effects were complex, contradictory, and deeply human. As time passed, the university moved forward. New students arrived. Buildings remained. Classes resumed. But Lauren's absence was woven into the institution's history. Her name became a reference point, a reminder that policies are only as effective as their execution. The question that lingers is not simply what went wrong, but what must never be allowed to happen again. Lauren McCluskey's legacy is not defined by fear. It is defined by insistence, the insistence that warnings be heard, that voices be believed, and that systems prioritize human life over procedural comfort. This is not a story that ends neatly. It is a story that continues. Every time someone recognizes themselves in Lauren's experience, every time an institution reevaluates its response to fear, every time a warning is taken seriously because ignoring it is no longer acceptable. This is Dark Psyche Case Files. If this story matters to you, like the video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and hit the subscribe button to support the channel and stay connected to daily true crime documentaries. As Lauren McCluskey's story settled into public memory, it began to function less like a single case and more like a mirror. People did not just see Lauren in it. They saw themselves. They saw moments when they had felt uneasy and questioned whether they were overreacting. They saw times they had spoken up and wondered if anyone truly understood what they were saying. This is where the story moves beyond tragedy and into consequence. True crime often teaches through extremes, but Lauren's case taught through familiarity. There was nothing extraordinary about her fear. It was measured, reasoned, based on evidence. That ordinariness is what makes the outcome so disturbing. If this could happen here after reports were made, after warnings were documented, then the problem was not ignorance. It was priority. Lauren's life did not end because danger went unnoticed. It ended because danger was not treated as urgent. In the years after her death, institutions across the country quietly adjusted their language. Phrases like concerning behavior gave way to potential threat. Reporting systems were redesigned. Threat assessment teams became more common. The idea that certainty must precede action began to lose ground. These changes did not come from theory. They came from loss. Lauren's parents continued to emphasize one core truth whenever they spoke. Their daughter did not need perfection from the system, only responsiveness. She needed someone to say, "We hear you, and we are acting now." That sentence never arrived. Instead, Lauren encountered pauses, handoffs, and procedural caution. Each delay felt small at the time. Together, they became fatal. When people ask what justice looks like in cases like this, the answer is rarely satisfying. There was no trial, no sentencing, no dramatic confession. Justice, in this context, became preventative rather than punitive. It took the form of awareness, reform, and refusal to forget. Lauren's name became attached to policies not because it was symbolic, but because it was earned through consequence. Each mention of her story carries weight precisely because it represents a failure that cannot be undone. True crime storytelling carries responsibility. It can either exploit pain or preserve meaning. Lauren's story demands the latter. She was not defined by fear. She was defined by action. She trusted her instincts and spoke up. She believed in systems meant to protect her. That belief should have been rewarded with safety. Instead, it became her legacy. The most unsettling truth revealed by this case is not that violence exists, but that it can unfold even when warnings are clear. That knowledge challenges comfort. It demands vigilance. It insists that listening is not passive and belief is not enough without response. Lauren McCluskey's story remains unfinished because it continues to influence behavior. Every time a report is taken seriously, every time urgency overrides bureaucracy, every time someone decides that waiting is too dangerous, that is where her presence remains. Not in the moment her life was taken, but in every moment after, when institutions are forced to choose between procedure and protection. This is Dark Psyche Case Files. If this documentary stayed with you, like the video, leave your thoughts in the comments and hit the subscribe button to support the channel and stay connected to daily true crime stories that go beyond headlines and into truth.